And we're ready for launch. Hello, everybody. My name is James Corsi, Executive Director of the Global Spaceport Alliance, and welcome to our webinar series. Today, our subject is international partnering on spaceport launch capability. First of all, I want to thank our sponsors. We have platinum sponsors RS&H and Merrick, and gold sponsors BRPH and Parsons. We also, since our last webinar, I'm pleased to announce that we have 4 new members: Blue Halo, Space Center Australia, H-Star, and ETLOC. ETLOC, some of you may not know, is based in Oman. With the addition of those 4 new members, we have a total now of 82 across the United States and the world. We're represented in every continent except Antarctica and Africa. So we're very proud of the progress that we've made over the last few years. To put that number 82 in perspective, the number we had at our January summit was 69. So we've had a significant growth this year already, and we're currently working on 7 or 8 prospects, both as associate members and as new spaceport members. Now, we just recently came off a joint program that we did with FAA in Milan, and some of you may very well have been in that meeting. But we were very fortunate that George Neild, our chairman, was able to participate directly in that meeting and was able to share with the group assembled some innovative ideas for spaceport development. But also during the course of the meeting, there were a number of things that were discussed that talked in terms of several ideas that wanted to be developed. One was enhanced interoperability. They also wanted to come up with innovative ways to share standards and improve space access. And they also, through an initiative established by Virginia Space, they also had 8 spaceports sign up under a memorandum of understanding for global collaboration. So all in all, it was a very successful meeting. Our intent, so that you are aware of it, is that we're going to take some of the findings that came out of that meeting and build them into the agenda that we're going to have for our summit meeting in January. For those of you who don't know, the summit meeting is on January 27, obviously next year, 2025. The subject is going to be building an economic powerhouse around your spaceport and leveraging what was learned in the Milan conference. So it's going to be a very, very exciting summit meeting. We just heard yesterday a keynote speaker from Firefly launch systems. And so the meeting itself is going to be very exciting. Now, the Spaceport Summit itself heads up what we've now come to know as Commercial Space Week. So on the 27th, we have the Global Spaceport Summit for the day. That is followed on the 28th by Space Mobility, which is with the U.S. Space Force. And then on the 29th and 30th, we have SpaceCom. So any participation in space in our summit, you have the opportunity to get involved with Space Mobility and SpaceCom as well. Now, I'd like to encourage all of you who are on the call who are not currently members to link up with Steve Wolf or myself or Izzy, and let's get you to become a member, whether you're a spaceport, associate member, or otherwise. Member benefits are up on our website at globalspaceportalliance.com. But in terms of a significant value, if you sign up as a member, you get discounts for space mobility and space-com registrations, which in many instances can practically cover at least 70% of the cost of our membership. So it's something to really put into your thinking caps with regard to next year. I'd also like for those members that are on the call to encourage you to register now as quickly as possible for the summit meeting. Finally, before we get going with the presentation itself, I'd just like to encourage you to participate in our advisory groups. Here's a current list of them. The details can be found at our website as indicated. All of them are starting to get ramped up right now. Each is at a slightly different level of participation, but clearly the more members that we have that are participating, the better. Interestingly, just yesterday, I was in a call in one of them, and a question came up as to whether or not this individual could join more than one advisory group. And the answer is certainly yes. You can join as many of them as you wish and participate as deeply as you desire. Okay, enough of my introduction and sort of update for everybody. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to Steve Wolf, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the Global Spaceport Alliance, and he'll act as MC for the remainder of the webinar. So Steve, over to you.
Thank you, James, and welcome everyone. I'm really looking forward to this webinar today. We're exploring the particular dimension of emerging spaceports around the world in that they are all looking to bring together a variety of capabilities, launch services, infrastructure participants, and other players that will make up their various spaceport ecosystems, if you will. And Sweden is the topic that we're focusing on today as the use case. They are particularly interesting as they have just announced that their launch range, Esrange, as a GSA member, will be partnering with Firefly. And we have both of those individuals, both of those companies represented today, as well as Air Liquide, which is an infrastructure provider. So we want to look at the dynamics of these and how they come together, and then provide useful information to other spaceports and other vendors out there that are interested in working with spaceports. So I'm really excited about this program. So with that, let me get right into introducing our panel today. Karen Holmquist is the head of strategy and sustainable business for the Swedish Space Corporation. Her role is heading both governmental affairs and the company's global strategy. Next is Adam Oakes. He's vice president of launch vehicles with Firefly's. He oversees Firefly's launch vehicles program. And prior to that, he spent over 10 years at SpaceX. So he has a considerable background in that domain. Our next panelist is Annika Bergman. She is with Air Liquide. She's an international business and marketing executive with over 25 years experience with the organization, dealing with multiple industries and an extremely diverse set of background. She is also the honorary consul of Sweden in Houston, where she is based. And along with these three panelists, we may, if we are lucky, might have a panelist joining us shortly, representing the national security interests of Sweden. So hopefully that will come about. But to get this underway, what I'd like to do is have each one of our panelists say a little bit about their respective organizations before we get into how their organizations are linked together. So with that, Karen, I'll turn the microphone over to you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I work for SSC, Swedish Space Corporation, the owner and operator of Esrange Space Center outside Kiruna in the northern, almost the most northern parts of Sweden. So just to give you a bit of a background, Esrange was built in 1964. We launched the first sounding rocket from Esrange in 1966. That was quite some time ago. We also launched stratospheric balloons, the first one in 1974. In 78, the Esrange Landsat ground station was inaugurated. And since then, we've also built a global network of ground stations that we use to support satellite operators with TT&C and with data reception from satellites. So from 2026 and onwards, we will also have the capability to perform orbital launches from Spaceport Esrange into polar orbits. That was a small, short introduction to our spaceport and to our company. I would also like to mention that we are a state-owned company. So this basically means being state-owned in Sweden basically means that we are to the most part, commercial actor, commercial company, but all our shares are owned by the Swedish government. At Esrange Space Center, we like to call this the most versatile space center in the world, and I think we can, because we do a lot of things at our space center. So sounding rockets, stratospheric balloons, I mentioned those already. We've been doing that for quite some time, and actually we are celebrating our 600th, that was difficult to say in English, sounding rocket launch from Esrange in a couple of weeks. We have a reusability testbed. We are currently preparing to test the European reusable launcher being developed now by ESA and France. We have rocket engine testbeds that our customers use. So we are a service provider. So we don't use this testbeds ourselves, but we let our customers developing rocket engines. We let them test their engines in our testbeds. And like I said, we will soon be launching small satellites as well from Esrange. The satellite ground network, I mentioned that as well. We have a global network of ground stations that we use also to perform services for our customers. This is also a big part of our business that we see fit very well with launching satellites. That was a very quick run through of our company, I think.
Excellent, thank you. And Adam, make sure you're off mute. There you go.
Yep. For those who are there, my name's Adam Oakes, VP of Launch Vehicles for Firefly. So a bit of background on Firefly as a whole. The company was started as an end-to-end space transportation company. So what that really means is, and what I've interpreted that is, we want to be able to launch, land, and orbit any payload really in space. So the company was originally started in 2014. I know it says 2017 on the slide. It went through bankruptcy and kind of reignited, for lack of a better pun, in 2017. And from there, it's kind of been a foot race to get our alpha vehicle and then the other programs off the ground in terms of getting into space. So kind of our current stats right now have around 750 employees total. There's a primary facility that we think gives us a competitive advantage where there's 200 acres where we manufacture and test all of our engines and stages, all within the same fence line. So there's 4 different vehicle lines, and the way to interpret that is we have engineers that are sitting across from each other. One may be working on how to land on the moon, and the other one may be working on the avionics that puts Alpha into space. And so that kind of breadth across the engineering platforms and the challenges of space, we believe enriches the kind of the culture, and then also how we approach the problems that you naturally face through the physics-based solutions that we implement to get to space. The other piece is, those last 2 items, is we're very vertically integrated. If you came on a tour of the facility, that's 200 acres, you'd see copper rolls in one end, and a rocket engine leaves the other end. And then similarly, our carbon fiber systems that we're known for our tanks, carbon fiber rolls come out of a freezer at one end, and then a stage or a tank leaves the other end of that system, and then goes to the integration building that's about 50 yards away. And so from a total test count, this isn't meant to be a flex. It's really just a status of we're very comfortable testing. Almost every day out at the rocket ranch, you'll see a test of sorts, whether it's a hot fire or a structures test. And, right now I think it's over 1,000 right now. Slides a little bit dated. So when we say launch, land, and orbit, this is, what you see here. So Alpha on the left, that first flight was in 2020. And right now we have the Alpha vehicle and the MLV vehicle. So the easy math on that is there's a 1-ton vehicle in Alpha and a 16 metric ton vehicle in the MLV. And then the center there, you see Blue Ghost Mission 1. That's a lunar lander through the CLIPS program with NASA. And then you see on the right there is our Elytra vehicle that we're going to use as our spacecraft platform. And the idea is, as a vertically integrated company, is you can take all of the components from one and kind of, to simplify the math of it all, it's really think about it as Legos. You take your different Legos that are needed for each problem of the space problem and just stack them together as needed and only try to invent where you need. So this is kind of the Firefly vision map. So you see we're covering the whole domain with our goal of being, if you wanted to put a payload on the moon, not only could we take off from Wallops or the Cape or wherever and put you into space, but we can also take that payload and put it down safely onto the moon. So Blue Ghost Mission 2 is probably the most interesting article we have, where it's going to fly actually on a Falcon 9 because MLB won't be ready when it needs to fly. And we'll use an Elytra stage or a spacecraft to basically get it all the way to the moon. And then it's going to have a series of landers and another spacecraft that's going to act as a comms relay for that. And that's kind of the most exciting thing we have going in terms of the full end-to-end piece of what Firefly's goal is. And then, this is just kind of our general map of where we're at to service. We don't go invent the payloads ourselves. Our goal is to basically take the payloads that people come with and put them wherever they want. So my interpretation of that is just providing a white glove service to a velocity in space or an altitude in space, and try and shoot for extreme customer service where you can. From a facility standpoint, I know this is based around the launch piece. So obviously our primary headquarters are out here in Austin, Texas. Apologies if you guys can hear the airport around me. And then our rocket ranch is out in Briggs, which is about 40 miles north of downtown Austin. And then our first launch pad that we have 5 flights to date on is out of Vandenberg at Slick 2. And then it's public that we've signed an agreement with Wallops at Pad 0A, not only to fly the MLV vehicle off there, but we're going to also use that as a multi-user pad for MLV and Alpha. And then the other piece that we have out in Florida is Slick 20. And then getting to the more exciting and interesting one is Kiruna out at the Esrange and partner with SSC to deliver Alpha vehicles to space from Sweden. And I'll hand it back to you, Steve.
That's great. Thanks, Adam. And so finally, Annika, tell us about Air Liquide.
So some words about the Air Liquide. We have been around since 1902. So if you compare with the Firefly, we are very, very old, but we do have a lot of competence to support the industry. So Air Liquide today, we are an industrial gas company, but we are also doing a manufacturing gases and application and equipment, but we are servicing the industry, the healthcare activity, home care, also electronic industry and the space industry. And we've actually been in space more than 50 years. And in a short period of time, I'm going to show you some snapshots of what we do. I'm not going to do a deep dive because you're going to sit there the whole day, that's for sure. Air Liquide today, we are around $30 billion company. We are around 70,000 employees in our 75 countries around the world. So we are a great opportunity and a position to help all customers we have in the various industry. Space is, of course, very exciting for us. We have been a long time in the industry, but what's interesting now is that the industry is going more and more into vertical integration that also Adam mentioned. And with experience we have for the various industries, we're able to help the customers in the various fields. It's about welding processes, about how test methods, electronics, whatever it is, we are happy to support. So just to give a snapshot what we do today. So today we are glad to be on the largest spaceport in the world, but also smaller ones. I'll explain what we're doing in those as well. But we have been now at Kennedy Space in 1968. We're running a high pressure, high flow plants there. We are also taking care of all the pipeline and maintenance. We are also having a similar system at Vandenberg. And since more than 40 years, we are running also European Spaceport. We're having all the propellants, all the supply, all the maintenance, and even up to the rocket, which is very impressive activity. I talked about virtual integration, and we are super active as well to work from the tier 1 suppliers to the rocket manufacturing up to the launch pads, because launch pads needs also help and support to be rigid and good to go for the rockets into the future. In space, in terms of high tech, we have been also very long period of time. So I've been starting to work with the Ariane program from the early beginnings. We did all the cryogenic tanks. We have done more or less 700 of them back in the day, so it is outsourced today. But we also did the design authority for Ariane 6. So that is a great honor to work very closely with them and to develop, I would say, the next generations. Vega, we have been very much involved in the LOX and methane stage, which is still there, but also under development, and also helium regulators, which is key as well for the rockets. We see those regulators as well today in the US market at some of the commercial space companies, I would say larger ones. We are also in orbit. We have been there for more than 18 years with our Melfi, which is super cooler. And it's also super cool because they're using it not only for storing the samples, because when you meet an astronaut and you say working for Air Liquide, then they say Melfi. It's like a commercial. I say, hey, do you like your equipment to store your samples? Yes, we do, but we also like to store ice cream. So when they're arriving at ISS, they have ice cream with them in the rocket, and what they do, they are actually storing the ice cream in the cooler. Until they finish it, of course, they have to work and then replace the ice cream with samples. So that's a sort of cool equipment, so to speak. We're also doing pulse tube coolers for Earth observations in Europe. We have several up there since many years with good performance. We have a good queue of new ones that going to go up for geo satellites as well. And as you know, with satellites, they need electric propulsion. So we have also services, of course, with the gases, but also we have a unique, I would say, field card, how we can also fill the satellites for our customers. And then going back, then what we're doing, I have the great honor to support SSC and Firefly. So what we're doing up in the northern part of Sweden, we are working, of course, supporting with the propellants for the test beds. We are working with helium from the balloons that Karin mentioned. And we are also working now on the third pad, which is called LC3C, which is the pad for Firefly. On the infrastructure, the tank farm, also mentioned earlier, tank high pressure systems for nitrogen, and of course, all the propellants. And then in the US, where it's more or less, I would say, there's no launch activity, so to speak, then we're working a lot with Firefly and supporting them in the steps for manufacturing, for gassing gases and different kinds of gases, and also testing activity. So that was the snapshot. A little appetizer what we do, and of course when you have more questions, happy to support you with a question and support from my teams. They're local, national, or also on the global level. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Annika, and we'll certainly hear more about that. And I love the term. You know, what you've just talked about is super cool. So yeah. Hey, as I said earlier, we might have a special guest, and in fact we do, and I want to introduce him and let him introduce himself and his work. That is Matthias Bengston. He is the project manager and space systems engineer for their space division of the Swedish Air Force. Matthias serves as a project manager in the Swedish Air Force and in their space division. So with that, Matthias, I'd like to turn the floor over to you for a few words and to say about what you're doing for the Swedish Air Force.
Just to tag on as to what Adam was talking about, he said that he was located quite near an airport. I'm actually in an airport because I just landed from having visited Esrange earlier this week. So my apologies for not being in an office setting. But my work is I am the project manager from the Armed Forces, and we're looking into several space capabilities where launch is one of them. And there, Firefly and SSC are where we're really looking forward to that cooperation to see what fruits can be ripe from those things. I think you did a good introduction of me, and I'll wait for another time to speak more if you have any questions.
Well, thank you for making the time, Matthias. And I think your view as the user of these launch services is particularly important to this conversation. So thank you for making this your first call off the plane. And I guess Adam is in the same boat. So just glad you guys made this work for us, because this is an important conversation. I do want to, so a couple of things we want to get into this discussion. For the audience, please put your comments and questions in the chat field. We'll get to those as we can. So we want this to really be a bit of a conversation. So I first want to turn to you, Karen, and we want to hear a little bit about the thought process that went into, when you, as you mentioned, Sweden has been launching, sounding rockets for quite a long time. You're about to launch your 600th rocket, which is super exciting. But now you're moving to a new phase with Firefly. Tell us about how that process was like for you. How you arrived at that decision? Why Firefly and not other providers out there and so forth? Because this is such an important thought process that all spaceports are going through. So, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. I'll be happy to try to answer. First of all, we've been thinking about launching orbitally for many years, so we've sort of revisited this question several times. But now finally, we thought time was we were ready for it, and the market was there, and also I'd say the need. The customer need, user need was there. We've started looking for partners in parallel, because, as I said, we are a service company. We don't build rockets. We needed a launch vehicle, but we don't only need a launch vehicle. We need a partner that we can work very closely together with, and to find that partner, or actually partners, we have two now, but to find those, it's been difficult work. It's been hard work, because we can't work with anyone. We don't want to work with anyone, because this is a very we are together with Firefly now developing a very close collaboration, and even a close relationship between the two companies and the people in the company. So what we were looking for was someone, a company and actors who sort of share the same values as a company that we do. Someone who loves the business and loves space the way we do. And someone maybe who doesn't, it's not necessarily the money in the owner's pockets that are obviously that is also a goal, but not the primary, not the only goal with the activities. And that's easy to say in my case, because, as I said, we are governmentally owned, and we have a different position when it comes to profit. But still, it's important to work with someone who has the same kind of values that we do. And we have definitely found that in Firefly, because we also need to find a way to collaborate for, it has to be mutually beneficial, obviously, to the partners.
Just a follow-up. How many launch providers did you look at before you settled on Firefly?
Well, pretty much all of them.
all the
I'd say. And It's also important for us that in this case, especially with Firefly, this is the beautiful Alpha Lady that will be launched from Esrange. She has flown before, and that's also important because this is a risk mitigation action from our side. We need to flight proven. I'm not sure you can use that in this context, but vehicles from Esrange.
Well, it's interesting, and maybe we can pull Adam into this conversation. In talking about it, it's not just about the technical capability of how much maybe the revenue you might generate from that, but it's that finding that trust in a partnership that with a provider that shares the passion that you have, and that's where Adam comes in. I know his history and SpaceX. I know he's passionate about space in general. I think as an individual, not just because you have a really cool job. Is that right, Adam? And maybe you could talk to that, and then talk about your side of that relationship. What made you feel that that Sweden was a good partner for you?
Yeah, so Firefly, we are a company and culture of passionate people. You have to be in the launch business. It's several months and sometimes years of effort comes down to basically a 9-minute flight, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong in that. So there's a few kind of tenets that go into that. It's not only having the passion on the people side, but also the trust that they're doing their best and making sure that they're going to go out and deliver what they can and make the whole team successful. So when you're out selecting kind of a partner from I think we're only the second company to do international work like this. Maybe you can say Rocket Lab from New Zealand, but here is the other. You got to be really careful and kind of how you go pick that, because there might be ulterior motives or things that you guys understand. And all of our experiences with Sweden has been, not only just friendly people that I think is the American stereotype, but ultimately there's a lot of trust in there, and you can tell they're committed to what they say they're going to do. That not only are we 5+ hours, depending on where we're at in daylight savings against them, we schedule all of our time with them accordingly, and it's basically every morning there's something that we answer to try and make them successful for the following day. And that kind of cadence is what we can do as a company, and as a few individuals that are helping push the agenda along with them to make the whole group and the team successful. So from it's why Sweden also, obviously, it's not news to anyone that they joined NATO, and our Alpha vehicle is very optimally sized for responsive space. And responsive space only happens when you have multiple locations to support, the overall need of whatever government it is. And that's where, space is a contested domain now. And we want to have a resilient approach to how we can go out and assess whatever's going on in space. And so resilience and deterrence kind of go hand in hand, where you need redundancy to give resilience. Resilience gives you deterrence by as one of the former Joint Chiefs of Staff says, other countries can go do things to our objects in space, but they just need to know that we're going to come back and punch them really hard in the face, and it's going to hurt bad. So by having the Sweden, as our first play, I think they have geographically very interesting location. It's a great team, and when all those things are aligned together, something great's going to happen. So we're excited to partner with them.
That's great. That's great. And actually, since you're speaking about national security, maybe we'll pull Matthias in, and I'm particularly interested in your expectations for Firefly to support your national security needs for launch. And was there any hesitation of bringing in, a foreign, working with, a foreign launch provider for your systems, or is there general satisfaction or confidence that because it is a U.S. provider, does that make a difference?
Sweden has a long history of collaborating with the U.S. in various fields, security being one of them. So we feel quite confident that we'll be able to sort out any predicaments with the US and Firefly. So we're basically just happy to see the collaboration working so well that it seems that it's doing. And also what Adam mentioned about the responsive launch, that's of course one thing that we're also very excited about, to see that they have proven the capability. And we're also seeing that this cooperation will strengthen the transatlantic link between not only Sweden and the US, but even Europe and the US. So we're happy campers.
So Matthias, could you talk about the types of payloads? Are you eager to get them, online and start to launch? Do you have a backlog? I'm just curious in terms of your demand at the moment.
Sweden's we're the armed forces are starting the buildup of the space capabilities. We just recently, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, we got a big bag of money from the government that they're saying, here, use this to build space capabilities for the armed forces, and we're going to use that to build up a SSA capabilities, as well as operational satellites, and of course the launch capabilities. But of course, this takes time. Sweden as a country has all since the history that Karen gave you. We've been an actor in space for a long time, but the armed forces are quite new to this focused buildup of capabilities. So I can't tell you too much about what our big future grand plans are, but I can say that we're actively working hard on expanding right now.
Excellent. So let me then turn to Annika, if I could. Annika, your role in all this, or Air Liquide's role in helping to shape Esrange. I know you have a longer history there. I think predates Firefly's involvement. So maybe you could talk about what you've done up until now, and how you're looking forward to supporting Firefly's integration with the facility.
We have been a long-standing supplier to Esrange in Kiruna, and when talking about partnership and teamwork, has been a really good journey. The local team over there are thrilled to work with them, and we have a good partnership. So I think whatever we do with the customer, this is key for us as well. We have trust, we have transparency, and the teams are working together, and also with the international teams to be able to expand and bring in the competences we have. So that's on the more, I would say, on the launch side and infrastructure one. Meanwhile, at Firefly is more on the manufacturing side for the time being, but I hope, of course, to see how we can also support them in other areas there in the future. And of course, it's also good that we are connecting the teams between the two. So I'm happy the coordinator to ensure that the teams working with SSC and Firefly are also well connected, so we can share information, because we have also a secret agreement between the companies, and to ensure that we are not missing something between the two. So I think international collaboration is key here. And then we have also, I would say, folks in the background. We have a team in Esrange when we're talking about cool technologies. Those are the ones helping us in the other areas where we do not necessarily have, I would say, local competences. We have a rucksack of competences that are pulling in for different type of activities.
Great. Yeah. So you see again this common theme of trust and this right fit, and it's got to be true, or that's something that translates for any spaceport that's looking to partner, especially in the big way, where there's Air Liquide and Space and Firefly are critical, large components of the spaceport. And so that trust factor has to be extremely high. We are still getting some questions in, so let me turn this and maybe Karen, one for you. There's a few here, but this concept of collaborating with other spaceports, either in Europe or globally, obviously the GSA, Global Spaceport Alliance, we represent spaceports around the world. It's very important, and a common topic for us is how the spaceports are collaborating with one another. And I'm curious if you could speak to that, your relationships, and how you're seeking to develop closer ties.
I'll be happy to. So in terms of competition between the spaceports, at Esrange, we don't really see ourselves as competitors to the other spaceports. We rather see ourselves as future collaborators, if that's a word in English. So we are definitely looking to collaborate with other spaceports. Just that, as Adam mentioned, resilience is key. The better collaboration you have, the more resilient you can be. So we do see that we will, and I think we must collaborate between spaceports in future.
Mm-hmm. I know there's a particular interest in discussing interoperability.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you're a co-signer of the Virginia Space MOU that talks about interoperability. These are long-term goals that where spaceports would work together on how do we find the interoperable capabilities that can cut across all spaceports. This area is still evolving, right? So so that's it's going to take time by its nature. Adam, I thought your interest, you when we were chatting earlier, you made an interesting comment. I thought about the sovereign nations and their interest in space, and I wonder if you could elaborate on that. I think I think I was going handing this off to Adam, if you could speak to that.
So Firefly believes that, if you look through the history of time, where there's been technologies and capabilities that have put humanity in certain countries in a also different class from each other, for lack of a better term. And it started with ships and who could actually cross the oceans and who found the other sides of the continents and so forth. And then it became eventually tanks, and then airplanes, and the latest one is probably drones, where every country that wants to could probably have their own drone program. And Firefly believes that launch is the next frontier of that, no pun intended, but it's one that we believe that for a country that, is like-minded to America and kind of how we view the world ahead, it's something that Firefly is willing to enable, to have sovereign launch. And that way everyone has access to space on their terms, at their cadence and their frequency. And so the way the contract is set up with Sweden is, we're going to show up with a few rockets and we're going to let them look over our shoulder. A handful of rockets later, we're going to be watching them operate our vehicle. And then who knows, maybe, in due time, they're actually fabricating a good chunk of our rockets that fly from there, and they kind of go at their own pace. And the analogy to that is not new to, the defense market or any, I'll say aerospace market. There's a lot of jet engines and a lot of capabilities that the American Navy has, and the American Air Force and so forth, that are actually not domestically manufactured or born in technology. So the model is there. It's just, as we all want to make our impact as a generation. And I think ours is obviously going to be space. It's not just landing on the moon. It's going to be the proliferation and, boots on another planet at some point.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. I mean, we're talking about spaceports. This is how do we get off the Earth, but there's a whole other side of, well, what are we going to do when we're up there, right? Especially as humans get part of this, get more and more part of the equation. But let's stay with Adam for a second, because I want to throw him a question from the audience, and he's asking, could you elaborate on the launch vehicle and technical services integration progress thus far at Esrange, and what the long-term objectives there might be? So what's your status there?
Yeah, so there is a payload integration facility that was actually sized, because we're going to go build it. You buy once, cry once. If you ever bought big machines, that's the mantra to live by. And so the facility there has 2 bays equivalently for MLB size payloads. So for those who are familiar with the NSSL Cat A, B, and C system, it's basically a Cat A and B sized PPF on one side, and then the other side is an integration lane for the vehicle. So from a technical services integration, it's just like other spaceports where we'll show up with our vehicle and a fairing, and then the payload customer shows up with their piece, and we put it all together and do whatever ground checks we need to, roll out to the pad, and then we're off to the races.
Excellent, excellent. And let's see, I'm looking at the other questions here. We always talk about spaceports as an ecosystem, and this, I'm coming back to you, Karen, here. You're sort of the hub of this whole conversation because you're the ultimate overseer. But are you looking at, how do you look for potential tenants? Now, this gets to another question. So you have your group of providers that help make your spaceport run, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's a sort of an ecosystem around the spaceport. How do you address that in terms of attracting other kinds of space companies, other users? What's your strategy in that regard? Because we talk so much about that at the GSA.
Yeah, and that is one of the more difficult parts to be to sort of be the engine of an ecosystem, and that's what we're hoping to be. There is a regional ecosystem being built up slowly, I'd say, where I guess and I hope it will gain speed once our services are in place, when the need for other service providers and other providers of whatever is more continuous. But we are, like Adam explained, we are not only a spaceport, we are for now, but we are also aiming to become the launch service provider in the end, and that's one of the reasons Firefly is such a perfect partner for us, because they are helping us to become a launch service provider even.
Well, you mentioned that when we talked earlier about this, the process by which, and maybe you could just speak to that a little bit, because Adam did talk about the status, but the sort of crawl, walk, run strategy.
Yeah, right.
So how explain that a little bit more, which I think is very relevant here.
Yeah, well, to begin with, Adam and his crew will, like Adam said, they will send the rockets over to us, but they will also perform the launch, and we will look over their shoulders and learn, and then we will slowly learn to handle the rockets on our own and to launch them in the end on our own, more or less, at least.
Okay, great. And the other side of this is, of course, you're now increasing this capacity for getting things, larger and larger things, into orbit. That begs the question about markets, right? So Matthias was talking about, obviously there's national security needs in support of Sweden, but also in support of NATO and so forth. But other markets, what about the commercial side of the markets? Can you talk about that, your expectations there? Do you have a business model around expected launch rates and so forth? And Karen, I'll start with you, but then maybe Adam could pick that up after you as well to add some.
Yeah, and we are actually we're building a commercial service that will be used by commercial actors and others, like the Swedish Armed Forces, for example. So that is what we're aiming for. But yes, we see a growing commercial market, and what we've seen is that when we first started building our spaceport, we were aiming towards launching really small satellites, but we've realized that during time, the satellites have grown a bit larger again. So also here, Alpha is the perfect rocket to launch from Esrange.
And you won't be launching just payloads from Swedish payloads, right? You'll be inviting
of course,
payloads from Europe and elsewhere, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the Swedish market, if that's what we're aiming at, we will have not lots to do. I'd say it's not a huge country. There aren't that many satellites to launch. So no, we're aiming towards the European and even the global market, both for commercial payloads and institutional payloads.
Do you want to add to that, Adam?
Yeah, from a payload perspective, it's not, we talk a lot about Alpha and Firefly, obviously selfishly, but I think from a spaceport operator, we're not, there is another company that's going to operate from there too. It's a company called Perigee from South Korea. So for us, it is a commercial entity, and we invite the competition because that's going to foster the growth and the things that need to happen for the space economy to take off. And so PricewaterhouseCoopers said, it's going to be by 2040, it's going to be a $14 trillion economy in space. Obviously, launch is going to be a huge chunk of that. And just to give you a sense of how crazy that is right now, like the entire oil and gas is 3.6 trillion, I believe, total. So when you look at, as we start building infrastructure at each of these spaceports, and then obviously as a vehicle provider, it's important for us to, keep cadence. So there's a question on rate there. I don't want to kind of sit here and say, oh, we're going to launch on this date, because honestly, it's one of those that I'd be lying to you unknowingly or not. But it is one that the commitment to actually go build these things out, commit the infrastructure, and to do, by having Perigee there also, and then, RFA is partnering with Saxon Board and these other places. There's a lot of just the model itself is kind of growing momentum, and the way the capital markets work is once you get momentum in a functional model, the capital will show up, and it's a matter of identifying those first tipping point type of payloads, which the EU market has plenty of stuff sitting on the ground. There's a lot of tension in the supply system, or I'll say the launch demand part of the equation for the EU area, and by launching from Sweden, we hope to unlock that by having a Eurocentric launcher. And then also, building the capabilities out of Sweden with a friendly country that, recently joined NATO.
Yeah, no, it's exciting how this is all going to evolve, and, certainly providing services. And I guess as it evolves, you'll add capability, you'll add capability for frequency. Probably other vehicles potentially will come online as you evolve. So it's all very exciting. I do have a question here for Karen. Now it's asking, Martin is asking, I guess, to elaborate on the question of collaboration with other spaceports. And so what type of collaboration in particular are you speaking about? For example, sharing lessons learned, standards of interface or operational steps, sharing launcher customers. So again, I don't know how far you've gone in terms of that kind of collaboration, but just curious if you have any thoughts on that question.
Yeah, sure. We haven't, since we haven't even really performed our first Orbital launch yet. It's maybe a bit early to say too much on what kind of collaboration there will be. And I think also once there aren't that many spaceports in Europe. We have Kourou, that has been the European spaceport for ages, but that is in South America, so it's not on European mainland. We have our space center, and then we have the Andøya, for example, in Saxaford, and so there are others being built, and I think we need to focus on getting our stuff together, and then we can discuss somewhat in parallel, but probably a bit later, what kind of collaboration we see is doable and is necessary to make sure we are all successful, because we, at least in my opinion, also in SSC's opinion, we will need all of these spaceports. So that is my not great answer, but that is my answer.
No, and you're also speaking to the nature of the nascency of spaceports in general around the world. We're only just getting into capability that wasn't there before, and as that evolves, so will the integration of the spaceports. I'm going to have one more question for you, and then I'm going to give you a break for a little bit, Karen. So James is asking, you know, you have gone through a process of building these relationships, and you know, what lessons I imagine after coming through a process like that, there may be some lessons or lessons you could share with other spaceports about the process, from your perspective, things that people should be aware of and watch out for as they begin to work with and seek out other major partners for their facilities. You have some thoughts on that?
My first advice would be, if you plan on working with a US entity, start working on the TSA very early, because that takes time. That would be my first advice. But otherwise, just be careful who you work with, or careful is the wrong word, but make sure you find a partner that is actually a partner, and there has to be mutual benefit. I mean, we've been through some hard times due to delays of decision from both our company sides, I guess, and the teams need to be able to work through these, and the teams need to be able to find routes around obstacles, and not just sit around and wait for someone else to do something. So make sure you partner with someone who, like I said earlier, share your values, and that you find a real will to collaborate. I think maybe that's not really lessons.
Really good
the
thoughts.
TSA is the lessons learned, but the others are, I guess, more.
Well, it's being thorough, vetting, due diligence, and being very proactive in the process, right? As you know, and I think you're talking about that sometimes things could kind of time could pass, and next steps aren't taken, and you have to be very aggressively proactive.
And there's actually one more thing. The team the teams from the respective companies, they need to be empowered with the right mandate, and the companies need to trust the team members to give them enough freedom to work around these obstacles. I know the Firefly team is amazing, and the team we have, it's definitely not me. It's all the others that they know what they're doing, and that is very important.
Of course, that's great. Well, that's excellent. Now, Adam, I'm gonna turn this over to you now, because the same kind of question. You know, you're talking to spaceports all over the world, I'm sure. You know, what does any spaceport need to know about if they want to have a chance of having Firefly partner with them and establish launch capability at their spaceport?
there's kind of two things that come out of this is one of them is standards. You got to pick which ones you're going to abide by and which ones you're not. So people familiar with the American, federal ranges, we call it Spaceman 91710. That basically makes sure that everything you're designing on the ground is not going to hurt other people in, during day-to-day operations. And then there's basically SMC 16 and SMC 25, which are the guidelines for how Americans design launch vehicles. Unfortunately, some of that's been paid in blood, but the guidelines are pretty straightforward in terms of, test what you need to on the ground to make sure when you actually let go of it, it does what it needs to. So that's kind of the vehicle piece of the regulatory side. Once you actually get off the ground, the thing that's interesting about SSC in Sweden is they are following the FAA model, and they have kind of the benefit of being the one that looks at the problem second. There's always a natural benefit to see where the pitfalls are if you're the first one kind of, hand-to-hand combat through the regulatory and tailoring efforts. So they're going to take the good parts of that and implement those within the Swedish airspace. And how that's playing out for American companies and even, Rocket Lab, the way the FAA is set out is, even though there's not a company that's been fully licensed, there's a program called Part 450, which is really going to let a launch provider own kind of their own regulatory piece as long as they demonstrate their processes cover what's necessary to be a successful launch provider. You're not going to fly you're not going to fly with anything else in your airspace and all the other basics that come through that. We've been operating on what's called 415 and 417, which are normally duration-based licenses or launch vehicle count-based licenses. And that's, the world wants to go to the true airport model where, you can show up 32 minutes before a plane takes off and be anywhere in the world legitimately. And there's no reason spaceports should not have that kind of mentality of, if a payload fits in the area and it passes all the CLA effort and all the other, acoustics and dynamics piece, why can't you just put that in space? And you got to get into where the FAA and the FCC are going to, pick their domains of and their sphere of influence over those, and they're in there for good reason. But as a spaceport provider, that's really most of that ends up on the actual payload customer themselves. And then part two of it is, don't go copy what everyone else has done unless it makes sense. So the reason Air Liquide is such an interesting thing is when you get an Air Liquide tank, you know exactly what you're getting out of that. This is not their first time going through this process. They understand, how to move product, what those tanks look like, where they should be located, where they shouldn't be located. And it's a very straightforward process to go, get the vehicle commodities to exactly where you want them. So it's really, I look at it as, it's really just a standard. It's just Air Liquide happens to be the biggest provider of that. And it comes with, you go log into Amazon, we all have the same experience. It's good for most people. And we all understand how that works. So I would say I would not make, the two things I would really want people on this call to walk away with is understand which standards you want to implement. So whether it's 91710 or whatever the equivalent for, NASA standards or whatever your country is going to drive. And then we always try to shoot for the high bar of that and make sure that we're going to clear any other standards, because I think the American federal ranges are probably the most strict. So that's kind of step one for getting into Firefly. And step two is don't go visit other spaceports and think that's what you have to do. I think we're looking for a partner that's creative and takes the first principle approach of what is the actual goal we're trying to get done, and then let's work together on how to solve that. And you'll see, through the Victus Nocta program, where the prior record was 21 days to go from encapsulation to launch. And, with literally a handful of napkin sketch drawings and some Googling, we ended up for not even a six-figure amount of money coming up with a process and a way to go and actually encapsulate our vehicle that was not intended to be a responsive space, payload setup. There's a lot of stuff we could do if someone said, hey, you need to go do this within an hour. We would change the designs in a lot of different ways, but being able to navigate around those challenges with what you have is kind of the mantra for Spaceport. Because once you commit to civil infrastructure capital, you got to figure out how to use what you got.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting, especially this idea of what's your standards as being primary, even ahead of, do you have the money to invest, or what is your range like, and do you have other kinds of considerations, it's really I really appreciate that. I want to bring in, since you mentioned Air Liquide, let me bring in Annika back in here for a bit. So Annika, speak to that. Air Liquide has a tremendous history, long history. How important is it for any kind of space activity that we are using certain tested, reliable technologies that can support the innovations that Firefly represents?
It's about reliability as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have standards, and then of course we are also following the local standards depending what type of equipment it is. And what is also important is planning, because some customers, especially fast running customers, think you can just open the tap and water is coming out and gas as well. So when you're in a ramp up phase, that's fine. Normally we can supply the customer, but then if you have a higher volumes or cadences, then we need to plan in advance. So we love to be in an early stage, even though the launch might be 2-3 years out. But if you need the high volume, it might be that we need also an on-site, which is also reliable and safe and have our standards and our similar equipment around the world. So reliability is key. And of course, then not only the equipment as such, but also to have the capabilities and the local expertise to take care of the maintenance, the safety valve, talking to the customer to ensure the supply chain and everything is working 100%, because you don't want to have a rocket on the ground due to the fact you are not able to deliver the product. So normally the major companies in the world, they are safe because it's about our reputation within the industry for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but we're trying to service the customer in the best way we can, and reliable equipment, whatever it's tanks, supply chain, or also plants is key for us.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we have customer special demands. So also we could have also engineering team looking into what kind of demands they have to do, I would say, not standard plant, but also more customized plants, depending on the customer needs.
Mm-hmm. Occasionally a municipality or government or sovereign state might say, you know what, we need a spaceport now. Maybe they don't have any particular expertise in the country. Are you all, and again, Annika and Adam, are you all prepared to work with that kind of a sovereign that might say, listen, we've got some land in the northern part of the country that's pretty empty, can you build us a spaceport there? Are they ready for a conversation with you? And if not, what would they need to do to get there?
So if I start, because there's a lot of projects going on in the world, they need to have someone leading it as a whole, because to build a spaceport requires a lot. So what we are providing them is the infrastructure for the gas supply. And we also need to understand what is the ambition and how we can ramp it up and how can we supply from the early stage to a longer stage. But we are not the ones doing a full airport, a spaceport construction, but we're helping with the industrial structure related to propellants and gases. That we do, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the people who pick up the phone and call us range from people with existing spaceports all the way to greenfield sites that ultimately we don't know what's there. So I'll say everything I've said on this phone call is obviously as long as the American government allows it, right? We can't export what things that we don't. So I'll put that tagline in there just in case. But ultimately, as long as they're aligned with kind of our approach to life and humanity as a whole, we can teach people how to go build a spaceport and to Annika's point, if there's not a champion within not only the government but the commercial entities of that country, it's gonna be one of those that it's gonna, we'll go move some dirt around and probably pour some concrete, and then ultimately it's gonna be a sin because it's just a bunch of wasted money. But if you get a champion and someone that's not on, maybe they are in an election cycle, but the beauty of working with SOC is they're not on an election cycle of what's happening. It's been, we have 10-year roadmaps that are actually out there that say, hey, here's what this looks like in the future. It's not going to be a guarantee, but let's talk about what that vision is. And having a champion that sets that vision and drives it is really, and it's not even a 9-digit number to go build and launch a rocket. And most countries have that kind of money. They just don't feel like they have the drive, and they just don't know that they can. And I think the other piece I'll say is the other thing that's going to change in our lifetimes is there's going to be landlocked launches that are not, government forced soon enough. Like that's going to happen in our lifetime because with the reliability of the vehicle, the predictability of where it's going to come down, and all the other things that go into that, that is going to be something where, you look at all the coastal countries, it's going to be, 10x of countries that are able to launch from landlocked locations. So, yeah.
Excellent answer. I want to shift now, if I can. James brings up another topic that's very common with the GSA that we'd like to discuss, and that's around workforce development. And actually, I could turn to Karen, and I think Matthias might have a view on this as we as space becomes a more prominent aspect of life in the world, and certainly in Sweden. How is that? How are you looking to to staff your future capability? And develop that workforce broadly. And is this something you've been thinking about as part of this process, Karen?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, without the competence and the people, there's no one to work with the service. So absolutely. And we've tried to bring people in early to give them to train them and give them a chance to learn by being part of the team with also experienced people. And also here partnering with someone who's done this before is a great help as well.
Mm-hmm. And Matthias, is this something you think about? The Air Force, are they looking to increase their ranks to support this space activity? And when will you create? When will they be a Swedish Space Force, like in the US?
I'm not going to give you an exact day when we're going to do that, because that's not up to me. But yeah, attracting young people and expertise to the armed forces for the space capabilities, that's really important. That's something we're looking very much into. In the early days now, we're seeing that we need a lot of civilians to come in to understand that the armed forces is a good place to work with space in. And we're also looking into setting up officer programs to initially take the Marine and the Army and the Air Force officers and retrain them to more space jobs, tasks. But in the long run, we have plans to be able to, just like Space Force, train both enlisted and officers from the ground up within the space domain. And we're also working hard on just spreading the general knowledge and the organization in the armed forces about space, and not only why space is important for the armed forces, but also for society as a whole, like with all the GPS and all the services you get from space. That's not directly linked to military security. Mm-hmm. So that is absolutely something we're looking into, and we're constantly being contacted by young people, both within the armed forces and outside, who are they heard us talk on some fair somewhere or some workshop, and they're curious on how can they help out and what should they study to be able to find their way into the space domain. So it's really exciting, and especially these last just couple of years, we've seen a big increase in the interest. And myself, I'm one of those because my background is actually in energy systems. So I had a long dream of becoming an astronaut, but I went to another field. And then when I heard that space was on the agenda in the armed forces, that really caught my attention. And now I've found my way there and learned a lot. So I think we're going to see a big increase in the numbers in the workforce.
Yeah, it is always encouraging to see folks that are passionate about space and choose this field and help and want to make it grow. Fantastic. I want to. This is also, one more topic that is that we talk about a lot at GSA, and that's what is the public reaction in Sweden to the idea that we're gonna be launching larger and larger rockets from Esrange, and have they been all supportive, or has that been a public relations challenge? And maybe Karen, you could speak to that, and then of course Matthias as well.
Sure. The public opinion, I'd say, is positive. I think the Swedish people, we're sort of proud of having this capability soon, at least. But to be very honest, SSC and our and Esrange isn't super visible as company or as a spaceport. There are many people in Sweden that they don't know that we actually have a spaceport, and that is on us to tell. Absolutely. But the general feeling is that we gain a lot of support from the public, and also from agencies and others that are really positive to Sweden becoming a launching state.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a thought on that, Matthias?
Yeah, I agree with Karen's view. I'd say that the public view of space for the armed forces is maybe that's mainly tagging along together with the fact that due to unfortunate situation in Ukraine, the public had started looking to the armed forces in a much more positive way. Not that it was negative before, but they really understood that, well, this is important to be able to secure our borders. And I think one mission we have is to take that feeling and put it on the face as well. As I said, when we're trying to educate people within the organization, we're also trying to do that to the broad public to show that space is really important for security. But I think there's still some way to go to have the standing ovations wherever you walk.
Well, I suspect
haven't seen too many negative things, at least.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting you saying that maybe it's not launch isn't on the radar. Sounding rockets are always exciting to watch, but maybe not as thrilling as maybe once Firefly starts launching. I suspect it will be very much on people's radar and so forth, and something to look forward to, but also something you never know what the public reaction will be, and as we know, some of the spaceports around the world have had some difficulties in this regard. So it's always something to just sort of be aware of and even be prepared for. And I imagine even Firefly has experience in that. So what I want to do, we have like less than 10 minutes left, and what I want to do is I want to bring in the GSA executive director into the conversation for his thoughts, and then for his thoughts, maybe a question or so, and then I want to give you guys a chance to make closing remarks. So James Causey, what do you think so far?
In the chat, Oscar Garcia had a partner who attended the Milan event that we co-sponsored. And in the chat, Oscar goes to me, wow. Well, frankly, wow. That was a fantastic discussion, ideas, perspectives, etc. It strikes me a little bit that this workforce question is a big deal, and it will require partnerships, the likes of which you all have set up, and trying to evaluate where I need to get a partner to help me solve a specific set of problems for a period of time is going to be crucial, in my opinion, going forward. But even if you bring the talent in from outside your country or your state, you need to make sure that that talent that comes in is helping you train your own workforce so that ultimately you will have a deep workforce within your space ecosystem. And I don't know if any of the panelists have a comment on that. Maybe I should just turn it over to them and see if they agree with that or they would like to add to it or otherwise.
Annika,
I'll
you're
jump
on.
in. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go first. I'll go first. I agree. I 100% agree. With now with Firefly, for example, we will work together, and the reason we work together is for the SSC people to learn from the Firefly people and vice versa, hopefully. So I mean that we will bring in more people, I'm sure, during the journey, to make sure as many as possible learn from this. And also we had this question on collaboration between spaceports, and that's one of the areas where we could benefit from collaboration, where we can learn from each other in different ways.
Well said. I don't know, Adam or Annika.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So we obviously run a facility out in Vandenberg, California, which you'd think would be a hotbed of activity for that. But getting people to move there for extended periods of time, it's a lifestyle change for a lot of people. So you do want to foster the local capabilities, and those are a lot of the success stories out of the Central Coast area around Vandenberg. Is people take a lot of pride in the area they live in, and the more you can train them to the next level, the more likely you're going to advance as a company, and they're going to be able to grow as a person and kind of as a community. And that's the win-win we're after with that. And let's be honest, rockets are just exciting. So it's it attracts a lot of the more fun talent and personalities out there. So you don't want to sign yourselves up to have mercenary type approach where you contract someone to come in, they do it, and then they leave. That's not going to have sustaining. To the conversation earlier about having a champion, the workforce development piece is that, and as Corinne mentioned, we're willing to train those individuals, and that's kind of our model. Is we don't want to just send you parts and say good luck. It's the full ecosystem and package that has to happen.
Yeah.
Matthias, I see your mic is open.
Yeah, I was thinking, as I mentioned before, that the ecosystem that is the armed forces, we don't have any from the ground up space officer yet. So we're reliant on civilians coming in with that knowledge, or officers having previous backgrounds in space. But what we're really working on learning from the civilians that come in, that they will work side by side to officers to get that knowledge to stick, and then to build on education forms and things like that to get that knowledge in the armed forces. So that's absolutely something we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So we're just about at the half hour. I do want to give you guys an opportunity to give any closing advice to other spaceports out there on how they should be thinking about collaboration and with other vendors and launch providers and other kinds of providers in general. So maybe we could start with you, Annika. Yeah, well, Annika, and then we'll go around just to any final thoughts you have. Oh, you're on mute.
So the mic is getting tight. So first of all, I would say reach out to us early, because as mentioned earlier, we need to plan in advance, and we would like to have the full picture, what you're planning to do to be able to service you for the ramp up and also when you're going full scale. So think about that and bring also in the competences required, ask questions and utilize the wonderful GSA network we do have. Because what is amazing with this industry is, I'm not saying the other industries is bad though, but it's like a small family and a very, very strong ecosystem. So everyone is there to support and help. And that could also build, I would say, relation beyond for other opportunities in the future. But thinking in advance, and don't say, I'm working on the product now. They say, we are so sorry, it's probably going to take us 3 years. I said, it's perfect. It's perfect. And then we can work together and we can develop something solid and also work together. Sometimes there might be government involved or commercial providers and also sell the concept together to a certain extent. So I think that's time is crucial.
Excellent comment. You know, communicate early. How about Matthias? Why don't you go next?
I'll leave the expert tips to Darren and Adam. But I'd just like to say, tie in with the responsiveness and redundancy, that the more the merrier. From my perspective, the more countries and spaceports we have that are capable of putting things in orbit, the securer and the more sustainable the whole space ecosystem is going to be. So don't be afraid to think that, oh, well, there's already SpaceX and they have this and this. Well, the more the merrier. Don't put all the eggs in one basket. So that's my final remark.
Excellent. And Adam?
Yeah, I think Firefly's view is, spaceports are just their infrastructure that, work with your local government or whatever, entity it ends up being, whether it's at the country level. And, because funding, this is a capital intensive market to operate in. So look at, where America would be if we didn't have highways. And that was something that, drives the economy and unlocked an economy that I don't think people could have imagined at that time. And spaceports are there are generations version of that. So pick the champion and make sure, arm them with the right information and data. And I think great things can happen in a lot of different states and also other countries.
Right, great ending thought. And Karen, you'll have the last word.
All right, I'll just from a spaceport perspective, I think my closing remarks would be to make sure you team up with a good partner. Make sure you work with the best people at home and with your partner. You need to be solution oriented and very creative, because you will find obstacles on the way, and be prepared to work very hard. It's tough work, but it's very rewarding. And as Adam said, there's probably nothing cooler than working with rockets and space launches.
Excellent last thought. It takes hard work. Somebody said space is hard, and I think that's true. So yeah, and as we work towards this future. So really want to thank you all for joining us today. And right now I want to turn the program to sign us off, turn this over to James. Thank you, James. Thank you all.
Well, first of all, thank you all very much for your agreeing to participate in today's session. I just want to underscore a couple of things real quickly. As a member of GSA, you have access to over 80 different companies that are doing a variety of different things. And we can act as a resource for you if that is something that would be helpful. With that said, I just want to say again, many thanks. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all at the Spaceport Summit on January 27th in Orlando.